What's up, Raj? It is Friday, and it is a beginning of a holiday weekend. Labor Day coming on Monday, so that is great. Hopefully you have the day off, and if you don't have the day off, enjoy the boss not being there. I used to love working holidays exactly for that reason, because there's no bosses around. The whole atmosphere of the newsroom was so much better without a boss being around, and you felt like you were working, but you felt like you were working just like half a day, even though you're working a full day. And it was always worth working the holidays. And if you're paid hourly, you're getting time and a half, and hopefully if you're salary, you're getting a PTO day for that. So hang on, gotta go for the rock star. You get a PTO day, and you work an easy day. So enjoy working on the holiday. I'll be here working. I'll be here Friday. I'll be here Friday, obviously today. I'll be here Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. I may pull back a little bit on Monday. I usually do on the holidays, just because there may not be much going on. If there's a lot going on, I'll do a full edition. So that will. We don't make that decision until Sunday evening, late. But I got an email this morning that absolutely blew my mind. I mean, like, blew my mind. I got an email from an MMJ. She's 23 years old. Very nice. Said that she reads FTV Live every morning, which I love those emails. I get those a lot. People say, "Oh, I always start my day with FTV Live. That's one of the first things I do." But she emailed me. She's in her first job. She's been there 2 years. Her contract's getting ready to come up. I guess she's thinking about moving on to her next job. She has a couple offers, so great for her. But she said, I read FTV Live every day, and I was just wondering how FTV Live got started. And the part that is mind-blowing in that email was she's 23 years old, and FTV Live started in the year 2000. So it's basically been 23 years. So now there are people reading FTV Live that are working in TV news that weren't even born when FTV Live started, which is, like I said, it's mind-blowing. Also makes me feel very old, which is okay. I don't call it old. I call it experienced. But she wanted to know how FTV Live got started. And it's kind of funny. Probably I was working in Pittsburgh at WPXI in the mid-90s. And I wanted to get... I was very into the internet. The internet was very new back then. I remember when I was working in Miami at WSVN, they had a webpage, WSVN.com. And the guy that ran the webpage in one of the morning meetings was bragging that we got, that the station's website got 40,000 views for the entire month. 40,000 page views for the entire month. FTV Live will do 40,000 page views before 9 a.m. in the morning. But so that kind of gives you an idea of just how far back that was, that 40,000 views a month was considered, huge. It was a success. And now, you can do 40,000 views in an hour sometimes, and obviously mega sites, the Drudge Report does, millions of views in an hour. So it just depends. But I'm just a little niche website, and I'm getting as much traffic sometimes in an hour as WSVN was getting back in the early to mid 90s. So I'm sure SVN gets millions of views now in a month, but back then they were excited about 40,000 views. But I was really I bought my first computer back in the early 90s. Obviously I've been working on newsroom computers, but my first personal home computer, I went to Circuit City, which is no longer around, and bought my first computer It was a Pentium 60 with 512 megabytes of storage. Think about that. Now what do you got? You got gigs, 250 gigs, a terabyte. It's ridiculous. But so I never really was like the computer guy, but once I bought a personal computer, I felt like I really I was into it. And I grew up as a athlete playing sports. I wasn't the nerd, I wasn't the guy in computer lab, but I certainly started to become the nerd when I got my first computer, because I felt like I understood it. I understood, I went in and changed the memory in my computer. I added another 4 megs of RAM, which cost me $250 or whatever. Now you can buy them for pennies. And nobody would put 4 megs of RAM in their computer. You would put gigs in there. So, but I felt like, as I said, I felt like I knew the computer, I understood it, but I really was into the internet. You could go ahead and you could, just the idea that this was a communications device, and I loved it. And back when I was in Pittsburgh at WPXI, that's when the internet, mid 90s and stuff really became much more mainstream, and you could just, see what was going on. And I remember telling John McIntyre, who worked with me, we worked literally in the same office. And I used to tell John, I'm like, there's something that can happen on the internet. There's a way to make money on the internet. And I kept, that just burned inside my brain for years. I just kept saying, do something with the internet. I could see the TV was starting to wane, but I wanted to do something with the internet, but I wasn't nearly ready to make that leap yet. The idea of walking away from a good paying job to making nothing, working for yourself and doing the internet, which you didn't even, know what was going on. Interesting thing. I started in Miami. I started my own little internet business making web pages for TV stations. I actually owned at one point Cleveland. I used to own WOIO.com. I was the very first person to register that domain, and I was working with that station, and I bought the domain. I think it was for $35. And then we didn't really do much with it. Their art department sent me some information, and I started building kind of just a base page. You could type in WOIO and you would see basically a landing page. There was talk that we were going to do more, but it was tough. I was in Miami, obviously the station's in Cleveland. And by the time I moved to Pittsburgh, it started to take off more, and WOIO contacted me and they asked me how much they wanted to pay me to give them back their domain that I owned. I owned WOIO. And I think I sold it back to them for $300. I should have, think about that. I could have held on to that thing and made a fortune. But so I paid $35, sold it back for $300. And that was kind of my first internet business. I also, they had another station, WUAB, their sister station, but I think I bought TV43.com because we thought, well, we don't want to have call letters for both of them. So anyway, that was my first internet business. So I'm in Pittsburgh. I'm thinking about what I can do. In the meantime, I'm getting contacted by the news director at WKBW in Buffalo. Pittsburgh's top 20 market. Buffalo's, barely in the top 50. But Buffalo's my hometown. That's the station I started at as an intern and a stringer. And the thought of going home, the news director, Bob Longo, was contacted me about coming up there and being the executive producer. They only had a executive producer. It wasn't a night side one, a day side one, or anything else. So he wanted me to come up and be the executive producer, and I was very interested in that. And I told him I'd love to come up and do it. And I went to my boss and said, I'm going to go to Buffalo. And he said, no, you have a contract. So I couldn't go. And so I hung around Pittsburgh for another year till my contract ran out. talked to Bob Longo as my contract was coming up. He goes, the job's still open. I went up to Buffalo to WKBW, which is, I thought, the coolest thing in the world. I'm going to the station I grew up watching. I'm going to the station that, I started at as an intern. I'm going back as the executive producer. How cool is all this? I got up there to WKBW. The day I started, Bob Longo announced that he was leaving the station to become the news director at WTAE in Pittsburgh. So I went from Pittsburgh to Buffalo. He went from Buffalo to Pittsburgh. And there I was, first day on the job, finding out the guy that hired me is leaving. And the problem also was when I worked at when I interned at WKBW, it was owned by Cap Cities, phenomenal station. Spent money like there was no tomorrow. They were traveling long before TV stations ever thought about traveling, and they're traveling worldwide. They were sending, when the Pope was shot, they sent a crew to cover the Pope. But now the station, WKW, is owned by Granite Broadcasting. So you had Cap Cities, which was probably one of the best ownership groups ever. And then you had Granite Broadcasting, which was probably the worst, if not one of the worst ownership groups ever. And now I'm working for Granite, and they are cheap, they're bad, they're terrible. And they had a general manager named Bill Ransom that didn't understand news. He could understand news about as well as this can of Rockstar could understand news. Had no clue. So, again, started thinking about the internet. Actually, I had like 4 more people in that newsroom. And we actually started talking about making a local site for the Buffalo area about... kind of like a local newspaper online, which was, you didn't really hear of at that point. And there's 5 of us in the station, but nobody wanted to pull the trigger and make that jump. And again, you don't want to go from making a salary to making 0 and having nothing and see what happens. But so the 5 kind of dwindled down. I still wanted to do it, but, even I was scared to make that leap. And then Krispy Kreme donut came to town. And Krispy Kreme donut is what helped get me to the internet. And I'll tell you how that happened. A Krispy Kreme donut opened up in Tonawanda, New York, which was a suburb of Buffalo, right on Niagara Falls Boulevard, which, is a boulevard that went to Niagara Falls. Imagine that. So the Krispy Kreme donut had been open for months, and it was still packed. Like, there was lines going down Niagara Falls Boulevard of people waiting in line to get into the donut shop. And the town of Tonawanda police had to be out there every single day to direct traffic. And so we thought, it's been months. This wasn't, it just had opened. It had been months. So we thought it'd be an interesting story, just, the phenomena of Krispy Kreme donuts and the traffic tie-up every single morning and the police presence that it took every single morning. And so in the morning meeting, I told the reporter, I said, let's do a story on Krispy Kreme donut. Bill Ransom happened to be walking by the morning meeting. He goes, nope. We're not doing a story on Krispy Kreme donut. He goes, they won't buy any advertising. And I'm like, what? And he goes, they don't buy any advertising. We've approached them about advertising. They won't buy any advertising. First thing I'm thinking is, well, they don't need any advertising. They got a line going down Niagara Falls Boulevard. So why do they need to advertise? They got a zillion people coming in every day anyway. But secondly, I said to Bill, I'm like, well, that doesn't, advertising, that's sales. We don't have anything to do with that. This is a news story. This is an interest story that here it is, this big line for Krispy Kreme donut. He said, nope, we're not doing the story because they won't advertise. And he walked out and left the newsroom. He was on, as I said, he was just passing by. So at that point, I told the reporter to still do the Krispy Kreme donut story. And we did it, and it went on the air. And 2 days later, the newsroom, the station as a whole, went through layoffs. And they laid off, they laid off, I think, 13 people, a baker's dozen, so to speak. And lo and behold, I got called into the news director's office, the general manager sitting in there, and I was one of the ones that got laid off. Um, and I don't think I really, with my heart of hearts believes that I don't think I was on that original list. I think it originally was 12 employees. And after the whole Krispy Kreme fiasco and me, bucking the general manager, they added a 13th to the list, and it was me, which is okay. I stood up for, journalism, and I got fired. I was laid off. I will tell you, I got fired. Yes, I got laid off. I got some unemployment, so it was a layoff and not a firing. But I still think to this day, I look at it as a fire, and I got fired. People are always so afraid to say they got fired in this business, but I'm in the camp of Linda Ellerby, the great NBC anchor that used to say, "You're not shit in this business until you've been fired." So I got fired, and the next day, my old boss in Pittsburgh, they had bought a station in, was it Altoona? Not Altoona. Maybe it was Altoona. Anyway, it was Cox owned the station and in Pittsburgh, and Cox bought another station. I think it was Altoona. I think it was WJAC. That may be a Sinclair station now or something. I don't know. But anyway, they bought a station there. My boss called me the next day after getting laid off, fired, and said that he wanted me to come be the news director at the station in Pennsylvania. And the money was pretty good. And he said I could even start as an interim news director, so he'd pay for my hotel room while I was down there, and I could commute back and forth to Buffalo. I had a house in Buffalo. And I could do it as an interim and see what I thought about it. And I thought, maybe. But I really wanted to do something to the internet. I've been thinking that way. We've been working that direction. And, this firing pushed me. And I had the guts at that time to just tell him, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not going to take that news director job. And I started the internet, my internet career, the day after I got fired at WKBW in Buffalo. I started a site called realamherst.com, which was part of Amherst is a suburb of Buffalo that we thought was kind of being ignored by the Buffalo News. And I started this site, realamherst.com. It had a section called the Boob Tube, which was just about local TV news in Buffalo. That was the start of FTV Live. And then shortly thereafter, I launched FTV Live, not really thinking about FTV Live as being the business, more just kind of keeping all my friends in the business attuned to what was going on, because we were all talking. I'd worked at so many stations around the country, and we used to email each other back and forth. So I thought, I'll put it all on this website for TV, and didn't think anything of it. And that thing started to take off, and eventually I shuttered realamherst.com, and FTV Live became the site that it is. And it's gone through. It started out as free, then was getting so much traffic, I decided I was going to make it a pay site. People would have to pay to get into FTV Live. And I remember talking to people, and at the time they were like, well, the only pay sites are porn sites. You're never going to make it. And I became a pay site. I think the very first day I made thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on the first day, and thought, well, there you go. And then it was funny, all the people that I was talking to, the New York Times, those people, all of a sudden, years later, they decided they were going to go behind a paywall. And I thought, well, you were the guys that were telling me I couldn't make it behind the paywall. So they're going by the paywall. So in 2013, I said, well, I'm going to go out and become a free site and be supported by advertising and the FTV Live readers. And they said, oh, you're never going to make that. That was in 2013. They said, you'll never make it. And so they're all behind a paywall, and I was out from behind the paywall. So I kind of always went different, opposite of what everybody else did. I like to always swim against the current. I've been that way basically my whole life. And that is the story of FTV Live, the condensed version. That took me like 20 minutes. to tell you the condensed version of FTV Live. I could get into a whole big thing, but that's the story of FTV Live. And I appreciate every one of you that stopped by, and I really appreciate that 23-year-old MMJ that has a couple of offers for a new job. When she gets it, hopefully I'll be putting that story on FTV Live. She says she's never been mentioned on FTV Live before, and maybe this will get her on there. At least she's not on there for doing a dancing video. So that's going to wrap it up for me. I can't believe I went this long. I'm sorry. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Maybe you can watch this over the Labor Day weekend, give you something to do. I'll see you on the next one. Later. Bye.